in today's class,
Mhm.
we'll start with LDNS probes, which
Mhm.
are quite important in production. So we'll start with LDNS probes, and we will be seeing the synchronization group, which is syncing up the configuration between two DNS boxes or a set of DNS boxes. And we'll also see the DNS-Sec, which is implementing the DNS over security. Okay. All right, gentlemen. So when our big IP DNS has to pick a virtual server. Okay, let me tell the topic name again. It's LDNS probes and metrics. So the purpose of the LDNS probes and metrics is when the big IP has to, I mean, when big IP DNS, F5 DNS has to pick a virtual server from a pool of virtual servers. We have a pool of virtual servers, and in order to pick one among them, we have seen in the yesterday session that we have a couple of algorithms. We have RTT, we have hops, we have what we have RTT, we have hops, we have damn. Okay, let me here it is. Yeah, so we have RTT, we have hop count, we have a completion rate, and we have QoS. So these are all the algorithms that we have seen yesterday, so which is where DNS has to probe the the LDNs, local DNS servers, from where the request have come. So from the data center, the DNS would be probing the LDNS in various ways. Okay, and when it queries, so it can query with ICMP. I mean, it can do a probe with ICMP. It can do a probe with the TCP. It can do a probe with a root DNS. I mean, with a reverse NS lookup. It can do an probe with a root DNS. It has various ways. I'll be speaking about them here. They are, but normally the the big IP DNS, in order to pick one best virtual server, it needs the metrics. It needs to probe the LDNS, and it needs to collect the information. How much amount of time is data center taking, the device from the data center taking to reach the LDNS, or how many hops is it away, or how much is the success rate, right? So these are the three major metrics. So these have to be collected by the DNS. Okay, but how does it do that? How does it do that? And in order to do that on the big IP DNS, we need to configure LDNS probes. Okay, so in this chapter, we will be seeing how the LDNS probes work and how the LDNS probes are configured. All right, so it's the same point again here. The network metric collection using the LDNS probes. The GTM system can use two types of communication methods to determine the best virtual server for a name resolution. So what are those two ways? One is monitors. One is using the monitors. For example, it can pick it can use a big IP monitor to probe the server. I mean the LTM or the other DNS, whatever it is. It is using the monitors like big IP monitor, SNMP monitor, or any other custom monitors that you want. You can just push them onto the device, and you can just use them with that specific server or group of servers, whatever the way you want it, right? But the thing in here is it uses monitors as one as one entity in order to check the performance of the virtual server and pick the one of the best virtual servers that it has in the pool. So this is very straightforward. We have a big IP monitor, which is the best among all we have. So if we have FI to FI communication, the big IP monitor itself is sufficient. It can make a decision at a wide range. But if you want other than the monitor, then that's your LDNS probes. So how does LDNS probes work? The LDNS probes is used to test the network between your data centers and your customers' locations. Okay, so it tests the network. It probes the performance of the network between the data center where our LDMs are sitting to the the LDNS wherever the client is initiating the request from. Okay, but by default neither of these are enabled. We have to manually enable them, right? But when you add an F5 system, F5 DNS, F5 LTM to a DNS box, um, the default monitor would be used is your big IP monitor, but your probes are never default. Okay, so what you have to do is you have to explicitly configure them. You can just see here. So but the GTM system will use whatever the metrics it has to determine the best virtual server and the best path at a given at the given moment of time, right? So then you determine which parameter or which combination of parameters are used to resolve each wide IP's name request. So once you have configured the LDNS probes, it does the LDNS probes, and when LDNS probes have collected the information, then you will be using the algorithm. Maybe it's RTT or hops or completion rate, whatever it is. Based on the algorithm you have configured in the pool, the DNS will be using that parameter. If it is RTT, it will be using the round trip time. If it is a hops, it will be using the hop count, how many, it's like a trace route, it finds how many hops away. And if it's a completion rate, it will check the number of packets success rate between the data center to the LDNS, right? So you can see here, so LDNS probes are designed to test the path between each data center and the LDNS that request wide IP for the name resolution. However, LDNSs are only probed if one of the load balancing methods is used in the selected pool needs the metrics. Now the condition here is though you have configured the LDNS probes, the BigAP doesn't do the probing to the LDNS unless you are using the algorithm that it needs. That algorithm needs a metric. For example, I have configured the LDNS probes, but the algorithm I'm using within the pool level is virtual server capacity or round robin, or if I'm using topology, or if I'm using ratio. Now, neither of these algorithms need the probes from the data center uh, to the LDNS, right? So though I have configured the LDNS probes on my DNS, it doesn't use it. Why? Because my algorithm doesn't need it. But if you have used any of these algorithms, to be RTT, hop count, completion rate, or QAS, second QAS is a combination of all these three again, RTT, hop count, completion rate. So if you have used any of these, then the LDNS probes would be needed because they demand it. RTT demands it, hop count demands it, completion rate demands it, quality of service demands it. So whenever it is needed, then only your DNS would do, BigAP DNS would do the LDNS probes, unless it would not do it, right? So there are 5 unique probe types that can be specified. Each method will be tested in order until the LDNS response. So what are these methods are? So here they are. So if you just see, these are the probe types. So first one is DNS reverse. which is doing an reverse DNS lookup, like doing an NS lookup on the IP address of the LDNS. So it's like for a reverse lookup. We have seen a reverse zone file, right? If we do an NS lookup on the IP address, we will be getting the domain name of that IP address, right? So this is the same thing. The big IP DNS is showing a reverse NS lookup on the IP address of the LDNS. So in order to consider this as a successful probe, the big IP DNS should receive any response from the LDNS. Either it's a DNS response, if it is responding back with a domain name, it's great, successful, or at least it should respond back with a port unreachable. Any sort of response should be coming back, whether it is a successful DNS response, or whether it is an unsuccessful DNS response. It needs some DNS response back. And if it receives any of these, then that's a successful. That means it is responding back. So these responses coming back are sufficient. It can analyze the things, how much it is successful, how many hops away, how much RTO, RTT. It can calculate, correct? But some means it needs a response back. So this is one way doing a reverse NS lookup. And the other one is the DNS dot, which is our big IP DNS probing the LDNS for the root DNS server. Okay, so it's a non-recursive request. Now again, understand here, it's non-recursive. That means the LDNS, once it receives it, it should not do an NS lookup. It should not do a DNS lookup process. Okay, it should receive the request, it should send the response, but it should not do any recursive lookups. So it's a non-recursive, both. All of these are non-recursive requests for the address of the root DNS server, and that is sent to the LDNS IP address. And here also it should at least receive some response, maybe port unreachable. Why? Because he is not the authoritative DNS server to mention the root DNS server IP address, right? So it will not be successful. So he simply sends a port unreachable. He says, no, I'm not available. I don't know who is he. And these three are very simple. So it's if you are using a TCP probe, it just sends sends a TCP SYN packet on port number 53, and the LDNS should respond back with a reset or SYNAC. But because if the LDNS is listening on TCP port number, if it is listening on 53, if it is TCP, it would send a SYNAC. Or if it is not, if it is just listening on a UDP, then it would simply send a reset. So any of these should be returned back. And the same is the case for a UDP as well. It is just sending an UDP random port to port 7 echo, and it should receive a response port unreachable. And ICMP is your normal ping. It just sends a ping request, and it should receive some response, ping response, or it should receive some error codes. Right? But when you're receiving this ICMP error codes, you should not receive the ICMP error codes from any other network device. You should receive only from the LDNS. So if anything are received from any other network device, then that's not a successful ICMP probe. It's an unsuccessful. It should be receiving from only the LDNS. Whatever we are receiving, we should be receiving from the LDNS. Right? But sometimes what you can do is you can create exclusions.
Murthy, can you please explain that root, DNS dot? I did not get that.
Is, yeah, our DNS is probing for the root DNS. You see here a non-recursive request for the addresses of the root DNS servers is sent to the LDNS. So it is requesting the root DNS server's IP addresses. It just probes the LDNS that, hey, do you have any root DNS server's IP addresses?
Okay.
Right. So it should receive a response. It is not the authoritative person to give the root DNS server's IP addresses. Why? Because it's, after all, it's a LDNS. So what he will do is he will just respond back with saying that no, I don't know, a port unreachable. It just sends a port unreachable. Why? Because the query is not the correct query. You get it? It's the same DNS request, but it's an NS request. It is requesting a name server with root. It is generating an NS. It is generating an NS type of record request, but for the dot server. Now dot means our root DNS server.
Okay, but later process would be same, right?
It's all the same. It's all the same. It's generating a DNS request, but if it is a normal DNS request, we would generate an a record query for some domain name. Right? If we are doing a reverse lookup, we would say that an a record for we would request a PTR record for an IP address. Right? See, this is a reverse lookup. But for the dot, we do the same NS lookup. But we will request an NS record. Now, what is NS record? If it is an NS record, the LDNS is expecting a IP address of a name server. Right? But which name server? It will define in the query. It will define this is NS type of record, but I want the IP address of dot server. Now, dot means it is your root DNS server. That's it.
But root won't be having that information of NS record, right?
No. We are doing the probe. We are requesting, the big IP DNS is requesting the IP address of root server to the LDNS. You get it?
Okay.
We are probing the LDNS server, local DNS server.
Okay.
And for the local DNS server, we are asking, hey LDNS, do you have an IP address for the root DNS server?
Got it.
So he's not the authoritative person to give us the root DNS IP address. Isn't it? He might give, if you initiate a request to your LDNS will return an IP address of an FQDN, but he will never give you the IP address of a root DNS server. Why? Because he is not the authoritative person to give the root DNS server IP address. So what he says is he simply sends a port unreachable because the query is not correct.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. And the one is exclusions. Exclusions is sometimes your LDNS probes are not permitted. I mean, you can see here from time to time some DNS administrators may request that you stop probing their site. Okay, maybe you are having some sites where the DNS administrators say that they don't want your DNS to be probing their site, their DNS server, their LDNS or whatever it is. They don't want this to be probed. Okay, so while the probes ultimately benefit their customers, you may have to stop probing some LDNSs. Okay, so in that case, what you can do is you can add an exclusion IP address. You will have an exclusion field in your big IP DNS. So you just simply add your LDNS IP address for which you don't want the probes to be done. You can just exclude from the list. So you can just say that you can add the IP address of the LDNS server, and you can say that no, this IP must not be, this LDNS server must not be probed. Okay, so it's just an exclusion list. You are just negating it. Normally, if for all the LDNS servers, the PKP will probe it, probe the metrics, but for the exclusion list, whatever you're creating, it doesn't do. Though the query is coming from the LDNS. Okay, just a second, guys.
Hi, Mosi. I'm Subandi. I have some question.
Hey, man. Yeah.
Okay. Does the proof only for the connection from the FI from one FI DNS to another FI DNS, not from FI to another local DNS like Microsoft or Binance server?
No. These are the probes from the F5 DNS to all the LDNSs, the from where we are receiving the request for our wide IP. These are the LDNS probes. The DNS is our BigAP DNS is doing a probe to the LDNS server from where we got the query for an wide IP, so that wide IP can pick a best virtual server to resolve it to that particular LDNS.
You mean that the proof is the purpose of the proof to detect the virtual server from another data center to our current data center, like to get the information, the status of the virtual server from another data center to our current data center. That is, no.
No. These are the LDNS probes. When your FIDNS, let's say you have a LDNS whose IP is 1.1.1.1. Okay, this is the public IP of a LDNS server. Okay, maybe you are maybe he has a client within their private network and he queried this LDNS server with your domain name that you are managing on your BigAP DNS. Maybe let me say that this is something like www.netminion.com. NetMinion.com. Okay, so when he probed your LDNS would start doing the lookup, right? So what he would do is he would be doing a query to root to top level DNS, and at the last he has come to right. He have come to your BigAP DNS, and our BigAP DNS have a wide IP www.netminion.com. It has a wide IP, right? So now wide IP is matching. It has done the load balancing. It has picked the pool, but within the pool, in order to pick the best virtual server, the algorithm defined is maybe RTT or the hops or the QS, whatever it is, some probe dependent algorithm. So and let's say this DNS has a couple of pools. It has virtual server 1, virtual server 2, virtual server 3, virtual server 4. Right? Now it has to pick, the DNS has to pick one from here. Maybe it has to pick one best virtual server from all these virtual servers. How would it pick? The algorithm defined is RTT, let's say. Now what is RTT? RTT is the virtual server which has the least RTT time that it has taken to go to the LDNS and reach back. which is taking the least amount of time to reach the LDNS. But how will we know? How will our PKP DNS know that how much time the virtual servers have taken, or the data centers have taken to reach this particular LDNS? So what the PKP DNS will do is it starts doing a probe. Okay. Well, let's say these are all the virtual servers present in the same data center as our PKP DNS. So our PKP DNS, what it does is it starts probing the LDNS. It will go and it will just do as I told here, whichever the things I told here. Whether it may do a DNS dot, DNS reverse, TCP, UDP, ISMP, which any of these can be used, or all can be used. That's up to you. You according to your configuration. Right. So let me say I have used ICMP probe. So what this DNS does is it does a ICMP request to the LDNS IP address on 1.1.1.1, and it will receive the response. Once it receives the response, it checks how much time did I take, to go and come back with a response, how much calculated time it has taken, complete amount of time, that is RTT. So this way, that LDNS, the BigAP DNS would be probing all the LDNSs that are initiating the query to the BigAP DNS in order to pick the best virtual servers.
Mostly, where is the virtual server located? Does it located from? Does it located inside of any LTM that have the connection from all the LTM to the DNS to the FI DNS?
Here I told you that these are present in the same data center. But if they are present in other data centers, you should have a DNS there in order to perform these probes. Let's say this is my US data center, and let's say this is my Europe data center. So here I should have a DNS to perform the LDNS probes, and we'll also have LTM, which contains the virtual servers for the server farm. And here also the same thing. I'll have my DNS, and I'll have my LTM to load balance the traffic, and I'll have my server farm. Now, when a query is coming in, let's say this is my primary data center, the query have come and hit this DNS. Now, this DNS has pool defined with virtual servers of both US data center, UK data center. So in order to figure out whether it has to pick virtual server from US or UK, what it does is this DNS will give a responsibility to himself that probe the LDNS. Along with this, it would also tell the DNS of the other data center to probe this particular LDNS IP address. So this DNS would do a probe to that LDNS, and even UK data center DNS also would do a probe, and whatever the results it has got, UK DNS would give it to US data center, and whatever the results it got, it knows for himself. Now he would compare the metrics on both of them. Okay, so I have taken, let's say, 10 seconds or 10 or 100 ms, and if UK data center has taken 5 ms, the RTT for UK data center is lower. So it will pick the virtual server of UK data center, and it will give as a response to the LDNS. So this way it works. So wherever you are having the F5 LTMs, in order for LDNS probes, you need a DNS there in order to perform the LDNS probes. Got it? So, Wendy?
So here you LDNS saying, so is it external LDNS or means what, some other organization? Not,
yeah, your clients. You
okay.
suppose you are accessing a NetMinion.com. Now you are an external user. You would have your LDNS, right? You might be having your Wi-Fi router acting as a LDNS, or you will be having an ISP provided a local DNS. So
Got you.
at NetMinion.com, DNS would be probing your LDNS, whatever from where you have initiated your query.
Yep.
I maybe understand that when we add the device in the FI DNS, then we probe the virtual server from the LTM to the GTM. This kind of the process is also called probe. But what you are explaining, the probe is also at the server from I mean that the connection from the LDNS to another DNS, right?
Yes, the one you are saying is prober pool,
Yeah,
which is to probe the virtual servers in order to check the health of the virtual servers,
yeah.
right? But the one I'm saying is LDNS probes, which
LDNS
probes
probe.
the LDNs, local DNS servers from where we receive the query.
Okay. So the LDNS can be any kind of the DNS server. It's not only the FI DNS, right?
No, LDNS is a DNS from the client side.
The LDNS from the client side.
Yeah,
I mean, still not clear about the DNS probe with this part. Okay, you can continue. Then we try to read more a bit. If we still not well understand, I will ask you again.
so Puneet, do you know what is LDNS? Hello, Sofani?
Yes,
Yeah. Do you know what is LDNS?
DNS. Yeah.
LDNS, LDNS.
LDNS mean local DNS.
Yes.
Yeah. So it provide the name resolution to the client.
You see here prober pools, and you have LDNS probes. Okay. The probes that you are speaking about is probing the virtual server, LTMs, whatever you have, for verifying the status of the virtual server.
Yeah.
Okay. But you also have LDNS probes, which is again to probe the LDNS servers from where we got the query in order to find the metrics, in order to test how far the LDNS is, how quick the LDNS can be reachable. So these path metrics will be collected by the DNS server, by Big IP DNS, F5 DNS that we have in our environment. So
Yeah.
path probes would be done from our Big IP DNS to the LDNS, and metrics would be collected. Once a response is received, metrics would be collected, and based on the metrics collected, decisions would be taken, like which virtual server is the best to reach to, which virtual server is the best to be given as a response to this LDNS.
That's all LDNS contain the same. That's all LDNS contain the same DNS zone or not? But regarding to your example, like LDNS 1, 2, 3, that three of them have the same DNS zone or not?
Your LDNSs will never have zones. What I'm saying is these are just the caching name servers. These are caching name servers. These are the clients. These are the clients' local DNS servers who are initiating the queries to your Big IP DNS for a name. You have something like www.example.com.
Okay.
This is your domain, and this is your domain, and your clients will be querying it, right? You have a client PC. He wants to access your website www.example.com.
Yeah.
First, he would initiate an recursive query to your I mean your client would initiate a recursive query to his LDNS,
Yeah.
and his LDNS would be doing the probe, right? LDNS would be doing the lookup. He would be going to root, he would be going to top level DNS, then he would be coming to your authoritative name server, who is your big IP DNS.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have a zone. He doesn't have anything. He is just a caching name server here.
Okay.
Okay, it is just a caching name server who wants to get the response back, and he will give that response to the uh, to the client who have initiated the query for example.com.
So the connection from the LDNS to the big IP DNS look like the forwarder. Am I correct? Just only forward all requests from a client to the big IP DNS.
No, connection from LDNS to big IP is something you have. I didn't get the point. Can you repeat that?
I mean that this concept it look like the local DNS or the LDNS just the forwarder. It doesn't contain any zone. When they receive the request from the client, they just forward all those DNS resolution to the big IP DNS.
Yes,
So yeah,
it never does that. It never has a zone, right?
yeah,
Why? Because it is not an authoritative name server. It is just a non-authoritative name server.
yeah. In the real environment, from my understanding, the LDNet always talk to the root server when they receive an internet query, the root server from the internet. So with this kind of scenario, the LDNet doesn't talk to the root server. It will talk to the FI big IP, then the FI big IP respond back the DNS query to the LDNet, and LDNet respond back to the client. That's it correct?
No, no. You are actually mixing up two concepts here. Let's say you have a domain. Okay, you have a www.example.com. Okay. Hello, Stephanie.
Yeah. I hear you. I'm trying to understand. Yeah.
Yeah, you have a domain www.example.com. Okay.
Yeah.
You have many people accessing that example.com, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they are some your corporate clients, or maybe it's a public website when people are accessing over the internet, whoever
Yeah.
it is, whatever it is. When
So
they initiate a query, when their local computer initiate a query,
yeah.
that would go to their local DNS. Do you accept?
Yes. Understand this section.
Yeah. Once this this is a recursive query from the client's machine to the LDNS is a recursive query,
Yeah.
right? Now, once this is done, the LDNS would immediately check its cache, and it
Yeah.
would check if it has a name or an IP. It would simply give the response. If it is not, it starts doing the lookup. It would go to root DNS. It would go to top level DNS.
Yeah.
What would top level DNS give? Top level DNS would give the authoritative name server for your domain, correct?
Yeah.
So here, this is your big IP DNS whose IP is 1.1.1.1. And this is your authoritative name server for example.com. So top level DNS have given this IP 1.1.1.1 as authoritative name server IP address to this LDNS. So
Yeah.
root have given the top level DNS IP address, and the top level DNS have given the authoritative name server IP address, who is your big IP DNS. Now the client will come to the big IP DNS,
Yeah.
and where his query will be matching the wide IP www.example.com.
Yeah.
Now, once this matches to wide IP, load balancing would be done. A pool, a round robin ratio, topology, whatever it is, pool
Yeah.
is selected. Pool is selected at the wide IP. But once the pool is selected, within the pool, we have couple of virtual servers, isn't it?
Yeah, understand.
This is completely a pool. Now, within this pool, in order to pick a virtual server, we have an algorithm, something like RTT, hops, or completion rate. This dynamic algorithm, any one of these dynamic algorithms is defined.
Yeah.
Now, let's say if you have defined the algorithm as RTT to pick the best virtual server. What is RTT? RTT means Big IP DNS has to pick a virtual server whose time to reach DNS is very low to reach and get back the response. Right? What is RTT? That's what we have seen yesterday. RTT is picking up the virtual server who takes the least amount of time to go and come back to the LDNS.
Okay.
So in order to take a decision here, if your RTT is defined, who will do the probe here? How will the Big IP DNS know that how much time did the virtual server have taken to go and come back? Who will do that probes?
Okay, I would interrupt you a bit. In this stage, it's not the listener IP that read to the LDNS for the connection from virtual server, but it is the virtual server IP that must reach back to the global, reach back to the LDNS. When
No, it's not the virtual server. It's not the virtual server actually. The concept is that, but it's not the virtual server. You will have Big IP DNS in the data center, and that DNS would be going and reaching the LDNS server. So it should not be the virtual server, but it will be the data center DNS box who does the probe.
you mean that the source should be the listener IP, right? And the listener IP is the one that have the connection to the virtual server. It check which virtual server should be respond back to the outside LDNS.
It can be a listener address based on the routing. How the routing is done on this Big IP DNS, based on the routing, it will pick the interface IP address and it does the LDNS probe. It should not, it's not a compulsory that it should be a listener IP address. No, based on the routing, right? If you have a default route given on the DNS from the management interface, the management interface would be doing the routing. The management interface IP will be used to probe.
No, but once IP will be resolved, so DNS part will be done, right? And then whole communication will in between that LDNS and that what virtual server, right?
But name has not resolved yet, right? Once the name is resolved, that's it. Now if there are any queries coming in, then it would do the probe. If it is not, it would be maintaining that metrics in the cache for certain amount of time that which you will configure, and later on it will wipe that metrics off, and it will not do any queries later on, unless again if there is a query coming in from that LDNS.
No, but virtual server means what from the pool. If any of the virtual server selected, it means what the DNS query has been resolved, right?
Yeah, if a virtual server is picked, that means resolution is done.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah, but if in order to pick that virtual server, we are doing the probe, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You got it. We haven't
Yeah.
selected,
So
we haven't picked the virtual server yet.
okay, okay. I thought means what virtual server has been picked up.
No, it is not yet. In order to pick the virtual server, we are doing the probe.
Got you.
data center. Now, once the probes are done, once the metrics are collected, that those metrics would be compared, and then it will be picking the best one, which has the lowest RTT or least number of hops. Based on the algorithm, it will be picking up one virtual server, and that will be resolved as a IP for that domain name. Do you understand?
Yes. So from my understanding, it should be the Ldns waiting the response from all of the virtual server. Which virtual server that have the better connection back to the Ldns, it will respond back. It will resolve back to this IP address. Does it correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I understand the concept now. Thank you. Yeah.